budget requests for the military's Northern and Southern Command divisions. They cover all U.S. military operations in the Western Hemisphere. Topics include relief efforts in Haiti and Chile following the earthquakes in those countries, working with the Mexican government in its fight against drug cartels, and operations at the terrorist detention facility at Guantanamo Bay.
Good morning, everybody. The committee meets today for two hearings. Our first hearing will be to receive testimony from the combatant commanders of the U.S. Northern Command and the U.S. Southern Command. Then, at the conclusion of that hearing, we'll take a very brief break and start a second hearing with 4 senior Defense Department officials and a witness from the Government Accountability Office to consider the Joint Strike Fighter Aircraft Program. Before we start this hearing, I just want to remind the Department of Defense that formal statements of witnesses before the committee are due 48 hours before the hearing. Now, we make this requirement very clear in our formal communications with the Department, and it's important that that rule be met. We understand that there's circumstances beyond the control of individual witnesses that are the cause frequently, so we're not using this hearing to target or single out this panel or any member of this panel. We've had this problem in a number of recent hearings, and I would just simply ask that our witnesses and representatives of the Department of Defense to take this message back to the Department. We welcome General Gene Renoir, the commander of U.S. Northern Command and also of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, and General Doug Fraser, the commander of U.S. Southern Command. General Renoir is nearing the completion of his tour of duty as commander, and he's planning to retire later this year, we understand, and this could be his last appearance before this committee, and we give him therefore a special welcome and a special thank you for his long service. General Fraser is appearing before us for the first time as the Southcom commander. We thank you, General, for your many years of dedicated service to the nation. We again want to just offer you our best wishes, General Renoir, as you conclude your long and your outstanding career. And we also would ask both of you to convey our gratitude to the men and women who serve in your commands and to their families for their commitment and their sacrifice in carrying out the missions of the commands and the commands in which they now serve and have previously served. U.S. Northern Command was created following the terrorist attacks of September 11th, is charged with 2 primary missions: defense of the United States and providing defense support to civil authorities in circumstances where the U.S. military is needed to respond to natural or man-made disasters. The commander of Northern Command is also dual-hatted as the commander of NORAD, our binational command with Canada, that provides aerospace warning and control and maritime warning for North America. And as indicated in our letter of invitation, we hope that General Renoir will describe the synergies between these 2 interrelated commands. In addition to Canada, Mexico is also in the Northern Command of responsibility, and given the continuing high level of drug-related violence in Mexico and the attendant risks to our southern border region, we hope that General Renoir will update us on his view of the current situation relative to Mexico. And finally, General Renoir is the combatant commander responsible for the operation of the ground-based mid-course defense system, the GMD, that has interceptors deployed in Alaska and California to defend our nation from long-range missile attack. That system has been of considerable interest to this committee, and we look forward to discussing it today. Turning to the Southern Command area of responsibility, General Fraser and Lieutenant General Keane, his deputy commander and commander of the Joint Task Force in Haiti, have spent much of the last 2 months responding to the devastating human tragedies in Haiti and more recently to a lesser extent in Chile. The scope and scale of these tragedies remains difficult to imagine, but the stories that have emerged have captured all of our hearts, have called our people to action, and have put the Haitian and the Chilean people in our thoughts and our prayers. We applaud the work of tens of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who responded quickly and provided much-needed emergency relief to the people of Haiti. Beyond Haiti and Chile, General Fraser, the other challenges that we face in our hemisphere remain complex and interwoven. The drug trade in South and Central America continues to boom, and the illicit southward flow of guns and money continues to foster violence, corruption, and political instability. The region is not without its bad political actors, too. President Chavez continues to work to undermine U.S. interests in the region, to do everything possible to maintain his own power and align himself more closely with countries of concern like Iran. President Chavez's activities, coupled with the money, corruption, guns, and violence in the drug trade, are cause for great concern. The Southcom AOR does, however, have a good news story as well. The Colombian government continues to consolidate the gains of Plan Colombia by expanding security and government services to the farthest reaches of Colombia. Later this year, the Colombians will head to the polls to elect a new president following a constitutional court decision that prevented President Uribe from running for a third term. So, gentlemen, again, we thank you. We look forward to your testimony. Senator McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to join you in welcoming our witnesses today. I know that executing 2 wars in the CENTCOM AOR has robbed other combatant commands of the sustained attention of the Congress and the American people. However, I want to make it clear that the success of your command's daily operations and the fact that we don't hear about you every day in the news is a credit to you. It means that Americans are safe along our northern and southern approaches. So I thank you both for your long years of service and for the service of all the courageous soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines under your command. General Renoir, who has mentioned, this is your last appearance before the committee. We thank you for your years of dedicated service to this nation. There's no doubt that Northern Command and NORAD play a vital role in the defense of our homeland, whether it's dispatching jets to respond to unidentified intrusions into our airspace or providing support to civil authorities in the aftermath of a chemical, biological, nuclear, or radiological attack. The resources and capabilities that NORTHCOM brings to the table are invaluable. Since its creation, NORTHCOM has experienced growing pains common to a new combatant command. I'm interested, General, in hearing what steps you're taking to better operate in today's security environment, particularly those outlined in the recent Quadrennial Defense Review. I also look forward to hearing how the command is improving coordination and reliable communication interoperability between local, state, and federal authorities so that we avoid the confusion of September 11th. Not only as ranking member of this committee and a member of the Committee on Homeland Security, but as representing the state of Arizona, I'm also particularly concerned about how NORTHCOM coordinates with the Department of Homeland Security and the government of Mexico to confront the growing scourge of violence along our southern border and the growing threat of the drug cartels to the very existence of the government of Mexico. The increasingly capable and lethal drug cartels threaten not only our border states like Arizona, but the entire country. I believe there's no more important mission than protection of the homeland, and I look forward to your testimony. General Fraser, it's been a trial by fire for you. The Senate confirmed you less than a year ago, and your AOR has experienced 2 of the worst earthquakes on record in the region, a little more than a month apart. So I want to congratulate you and your team for the exceptional work you have all done supporting the international relief effort in Haiti and providing needed communications and cargo airlift support to the Chilean government as it rebuilds in the aftermath of its 8.8 magnitude earthquake last month. We have a number of interests in the Caribbean and Central and South America, but none so important than helping a neighbor in need. I'm proud of Southcom's efforts and proud of the men and women serving on the USNS Comfort, whom I am sure take for granted how critical they are to the lives of not only our wounded warriors, but to the innocent victims of natural calamity around the world. So I look forward to hearing about how Southcom is coping with the unexpected costs associated with these efforts, as long as the status report on our military-to-military relations in the region. I've long believed that consistent engagement is the key to enhancing security. By improving partner capacity, we can help the region decrease gang violence, drug trafficking, and human trafficking, all of which threatens both regional and global stability. I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator McCain. Let me start with General Renuart.
You'd think I've learned that by now. Chairman Levin, Senator McCain, members of the committee, good morning. As you are so kind to mention, this may be my last appearance before the committee, and I want to thank all of the members of the committee for the sustained support that you provided to not only our commands, but of course the men and women serving in our military today. It is good to be back with you today and represent the men and women of both of our commands and to talk about some of the developments that we've had over the last year and to mention some things where I think we can continue to grow and improve. Of course, we have to thank the men and women who serve each day, who wear the uniform, the cloth of our nation as they defend our homeland, both here and abroad. It's also important that we recognize the contributions of our senior enlisted leaders, and I'm pleased to have with me today my command senior enlisted leader, Chief Master Sergeant Alan Usry, seated here behind me. Chief Usry is the first National Guard senior enlisted leader selected for U.S. Northern Command. I would say that was a competitive selection across active, reserve, and Guard senior NCOs, and we're pleased to have Chief Usry part of the team. I'm also very pleased to sit next to my good friend Doug Frazier. As you both mentioned, during the past months, our commands have partnered substantially across a broad variety of areas. First, to fight the narco-terrorism in our region, the movement of drugs, to support law enforcement to ensure that illicit trade and trafficking is reduced in our region. But we've also partnered together to support Southcom in their efforts to provide the military support to humanitarian relief efforts in the wake of the devastating earthquake in Haiti. We're pleased to be part of Doug's team. As commander of both NORAD and NORTHCOM, I really have two principal missions, and Chairman Levin, you mentioned those, so I won't repeat them, but it's important to ensure that across a broad spectrum of missions, from air sovereignty to maritime homeland defense to ballistic missile defense, to support the law enforcement along our borders, and to support federal agencies both in natural and man-made disasters as well as large-scale events like the Vancouver Olympics. Our two commands have created a synergy between each other that is now inseparable. From warning to consequence management, that spectrum of activity is really the symbol of what these two commands have grown to be, and I'm pleased to talk about those both today. It's important also to note that we're members of a combined national response in many of these areas. We don't do it alone. DoD should not be the lead in many of these areas, but is an integral and important partner. We've worked very hard with our teammates in both federal and state agencies. We've spent a great deal of time on the ground talking to adjutants general in the states, to the governors, and to their senior emergency managers to ensure that we create an integrated team for success. It's also important to note that we have excellent relations with our international partners. Both Chairman and Senator McCain mentioned Mexico. Certainly, Mexico is in a difficult struggle, continuing to work hard on countering the drug trafficking organizations in their country, and we work very closely with our Mexican military and their interagency partners to ensure that the lessons we've learned in other places around the world are shared so that we can create strong capacity within the Mexican military and within their governmental agencies to allow them to succeed. They face significant challenges. We'll continue to work with them aggressively, and I look forward to discussing that with you here today. As for our Canadian teammates, as you know, they stand shoulder by shoulder with us on the battlefields of Afghanistan, but also here in this hemisphere. We work very closely with them in air sovereignty. They partner with us in JIAF South to counter drug trafficking, and we've worked very closely to provide support to them in special events in their country. I mentioned the Vancouver Olympics one more time. Finally, I want to thank the committee for the support you've provided for the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security. WINSEC is an important element to both of our commands. It allows us to establish relationships with senior military and civilian leaders from other countries, and it has allowed us then to bridge into some of these tough topics that we'll talk about maybe a little later in the hearing. And so we both feel that WINSEC is critical to our ability to interoperate in our region. Thanks for your support also to keep the personal security of the individuals attending these schools confidential. It allows them to speak openly, to understand and maintain that academic freedom that we value in our institutions. Our commands train hard to ensure our operational readiness and our mission effectiveness are always the best they can be. Protecting our families, our nation, our communities is the most important mission we have, and we take that very seriously. Mr. Chairman, as I complete my service to the nation, I want to tell you that this past 3 years in these two commands has been an extraordinary experience, much more complex than I would have imagined, and it created challenges that we are meeting and successfully achieving every day. I have to close by saying thank you to my family. For 39 plus years, my wife has quietly endured the moves, the changes, the challenges from Desert Storm to OEF and OIF to here today in the homeland. So I want to go on the record to say thank you to her for her support and our two sons who are both serving in their own way. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to answering your questions here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General, for your testimony, and thank you for bringing Chief Ussery with you, as a matter of fact. We welcome him as well. General Fraser.
Good morning, Chairman Levin, Senator McCain, distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored to have this opportunity to appear before you today and provide my assessment of United States Southern Command and our assigned area of responsibility. I'm joined this morning by my wife, Rena, and I just want to echo what General Renuart has said. Her dedication, her support has been immense throughout, so I just appreciate that continued support. It's also my privilege to share this table with my good friend and mentor, General Renuart. And because our appearance together represents the close coordination, alignment, and relationship between our two combatant commands. I also want to thank the members of this committee for your continued strong support of United States Southern Command and your outstanding soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, and the civilian personnel whom I'm privileged to lead. I've personally seen what these outstanding men and women are capable of doing during the response to the earthquake that struck Haiti on January 12, 2010. The devastation was tremendous. Latest UN estimates indicate that over 222,000 people were killed, 300,000 people injured, and 1.2 million people displaced by the earthquake. The U.S. response was swift, coordinated, and aggressive, and comprised federal, state, military, and civilian agencies and units, exemplifying joint and interagency teamwork, all under USAID as the lead federal agent. Fortunately, several DoD and U.S. government assets were in the vicinity of Haiti when the earthquake happened. As you mentioned, Chairman Levin, Lieutenant General Ken Keane, the Deputy Commander of United States Southern Command, was visiting Haiti when the earthquake happened. He remains in place, commanding Joint Task Force Haiti, providing superb leadership to the Joint Task Force Haiti. Within 24 hours of the earthquake, U.S. Coast Guard cutter was off the coast of Port-au-Prince, and a U.S. Coast Guard C-130 was on the ground supporting relief efforts. Air Force elements began surveying the international airport. U.S. Navy P-3 aircraft from our cooperative security location in Comalapa, El Salvador, conducted the first U.S. aerial reconnaissance of the area affected by the earthquake. Members of United States Southern Command's Standing Joint Force Headquarters landed and began the initial assessments. The first U.S. Urban Search and Rescue Team, a 72-member unit from Fairfax County, Virginia, arrived, and U.S. Transportation Command and Air Mobility Command had established an air bridge. Additionally, the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson and the USS Baton Amphibious Ready Group, with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked, were ordered to make best possible speed to Haiti. Joint interagency, federal, and state responders. All these agencies were working to support the people and government of Haiti before the first 24 hours had elapsed. Over the span of the next 3 weeks, the size and scope of the military response grew to a peak of just over 22,000 personnel involved in the relief effort, including an airborne brigade combat team, the hospital ship USNS Comfort, a 2nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, as well as engineer, planning, communications, and medical experts. They coordinated with the U.S. Embassy, USAID, and the United Nations and other international organizations to determine where the capabilities of the military could rapidly be brought to bear to support the government of Haiti. Supported by U.S. Transportation Command, United States Joint Forces Command, and every branch of our armed forces, our forces dramatically expanded the airport's capacity and opened the seaport to enable the vital flow of supplies. JTF Haiti forces distributed 2.6 million liters of water, 2.2 million meals, and 149,000 pounds of medical supplies, performing 1,025 surgeries and assisting the World Food Program in distributing 17 million pounds of bulk food. As the capabilities of the government of Haiti, USAID, UN, and NGOs have increased, and as the relief needs have been met, we are transitioning many of our functions to capable partners and are conducting a deliberate, conditions-based drawdown of our forces. The men and women who deployed to Haiti have performed magnificently and are the very embodiment of the teamwork and the jointness across the Department of Defense. They have been outstanding representatives of our military with their professionalism, sense of urgency, focus, and compassion. They continue to make us all extremely proud. I would not have been able to perform this mission to the level of success we achieved without the support of the other geographic commanders and unified combatant commanders, the services, joint staff, and the Office of Secretary of Defense. General Jean Renoir and U.S. Northern Command provided invaluable assistance. We could not have accomplished so much so quickly without the personnel his command and others sent to augment our staff, both in Miami and on the ground in Haiti. Less than 2 months after the catastrophe in Haiti, tragedy once again struck in the region when an 8.8 magnitude earthquake shook Chile. Working through military liaison personnel assigned to the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Southern Command offered to assist in whatever manner the government of Chile needed. Within a day of the earthquake, we distributed imagery of the affected areas to the Chileans and sent satellite phones. Additionally, we are supporting Chile with transport aircraft, a field hospital, and a port survey team. As the U.S. Embassy coordinates with the government of Chile to determine what additional support is needed, we stand by to assist whenever possible. While the majority of our attention and resources recently has been focused on responding to natural disasters in Haiti and Chile, we continue to address other challenges in our region. Illicit trafficking, narco-terrorism, gangs, and the potential for the spread of WMD pose the principal security threats in the region. The region remains very dynamic. Brazil continues its rapid emergence as a regional leader with global influence. Globalization of information, markets, resources, and financial transactions remain a force for change in the region, both positive and negative. Competing ideologies within the region are stressing democratic and human rights advances, and the increasing engagement of international players from outside the region, such as China, Iran, and Russia, continues to broaden regional outlooks and positions. Addressing the challenges of our region requires the truly whole-of-government approach, which DoD normally plays a supporting role. To that end, the United States Southern Command works not only to strengthen partner capability and capacity, but also to build important cooperative security relationships throughout the region with our partners, foreign and domestic, military and civilian, in the public and private sector. For the most part, our military-to-military relations throughout the region remain strong. Finally, I'd like to thank this committee for your continued strong support for the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation and for the hard work of my fellow board members who sit on this committee. As a customer of WHINSEC, I can attest to its critical role in our security cooperation, especially in its focus on human rights. Let me close by saying that the tragedy in Haiti is a stark reminder of the nature and potential severity of challenges we face in the region. The culture of cooperation, openness, and transparency we have developed, the relationships we have built through our enduring and consistent engagement throughout the region, and the emphasis the United States Southern Command has placed on partnering in the past few years have all paid a particularly high return on the investment in Operation Unified Response, the largest humanitarian assistance and disaster relief mission ever conducted in the region. I think also, Mr. Chairman, it's important to recognize that General Keane attended the Brazilian Staff College. One of his classmates was the commander of the Brazilian MINUSTA, or the UN-led MINUSTA force on Haiti. So the relationship had started a long time ago and paid huge dividends during unified response. Once again, thank you for your interest in our vital region and your support of Southern Command. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General Fraser. We welcome also your wife here, but she must be a little bit jealous when she hears General Renouard's wife going to have her hubby back full time. So let me ask you, General Renouard, some questions first. One of the major objectives of in the creation of the Northern Command was to create a dedicated command to support civil authorities. The Department of Defense is now standing up a sub-unified cyber command under Strategic Command, and it appears that that command is going to provide direct support to civil authorities in cyberspace, both in defense of the government and in defense of commercial networks. Is there a role for Northern Command in cybersecurity, and if so, what is it?
Mr. Chairman, there absolutely is a role, and I think we have developed a very strong relationship with U.S. Strategic Command, certainly as Cyber Command fully stands up. We'll continue that relationship with them. Our role is, if you will, a consumer of the cybersecurity that STRATCOM and Cyber Command have been designed to provide. We have a unique circumstance in that many of our mission partners operate outside of the traditional so-called .mil environment, and so our partnership with the Department of Homeland Security as they provide protection to the .gov domains, and then with the commercial private sector partners like Google and Microsoft and others, we are building a close relationship, and we then determine the requirements that STRATCOM must meet in order to provide that security.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, let's try maybe an 8-minute first round. Excuse me. General Renouard, the administration has a policy of requiring operationally realistic testing of missile defense systems, and there is a new missile defense master test plan that's designed to collect the data necessary to provide confidence in the operational effectiveness of all of our missile defense systems, including the ground-based mid-course defense system. First, do you agree it is necessary to have operationally realistic testing? Do you agree with the Missile Defense Agency that the new test plan will provide operationally realistic data and will provide the basis for having confidence in the capability and the reliability of the GMD system over its service life?
Mr. Chairman, I do support that, and I do believe it will give us good data to support the systems, and we work closely with the Missile Defense Agency on this.
And last year, Secretary Gates decided to cap deployment of the ground-based mid-course defense, the GMD system in Alaska and California at 30 operational ground-based interceptors and to make significant improvements in their reliability. This committee and Congress approved that plan. Do you agree with Defense Secretary Gates that deploying 30 operationally effective and reliable ground-based interceptors would provide an effective defense against the ICBM threat from North Korea and Iran?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe it provides us that capability. I'm confident in the capabilities of the systems, and I think the phased adaptive approach identified by the Secretary will allow us to grow a broader system of capability against potential growing Iranian threats.
As you just mentioned, the President announced the new missile defense plan for Europe that had been unanimously recommended by Secretary Gates and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That plan includes a number of elements that are intended to enhance defense of the United States against potential future long-range Iranian missiles. A forward-deployed radar in southeastern Europe, development of an improved version of the Standard Missile 3 Block 2 for deployment in Europe. Do you agree that this phased adaptive approach that's being planned for Europe will improve our capability to defend the homeland against potential future long-range missiles from Iran?
Mr. Chairman, I absolutely do agree. I think we'll continue to see the testing and development of the systems as they mature, but initial information looks very promising.
All right, and finally, on this subject, there was a recent GMD flight test, which at the end of January, I believe, where the system failed to achieve an intercept. And can you tell us why it failed?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a true expert at this, but my understanding as the operational commander is that the integration between the sea-based X-band radar and the missile, the test intercept vehicle itself, had a software glitch in there which prevented information from reaching the interceptor in an important phase of that flight test. I know that General O'Reilly is working very carefully to correct the software issues there, and we look forward to the FGG-07, which will be the next test coming up in the not-too-distant future.
We understand there were two issues there, and if you would submit for the record whether that's accurate, and if so, what the second problem was.
Chairman, if I could, can I take that for
yeah, for the record. You
please, and we'll get that specific detail back to the committee.
No, that'd be fine. General Fraser, the Colombian Constitutional Court last month ruled that President Uribe would not be permitted to run for a third term. And has there been a fallout from that? Is there enough time to have an appropriate election? It's a fairly short period, apparently, before that election takes place. Are things calm? Are there any concerns?
Chairman Levin, I do not have any concerns. I think there is adequate time to hold the election. The election process has been going on while the Supreme Court was deliberating on its decision. So I think there is adequate time. There is a number of candidates who are actively running, and so I'm confident that Colombia will be able to run a fair and equitable election.
General Fraser, relative to Cuba, as I understand it, we have almost no military contact with Cuba. The only ongoing contact is apparently low-level, kind of monthly fence talks, I guess they're called. But there's also a case-by-case cooperation in the anti-drug efforts, particularly at sea. Apparently, there's notice if there's fast boats going through Cuban waters. And I'm wondering, assuming that there is no prohibition in law, and we don't think Helm-Burton does have a prohibition of that kind of contact with the Cubans, is there any value in increased U.S. military contact with the Cuban military?
Chairman Levin, there is, as you mentioned, tactical level interaction, fence line talks. And the United States Coast Guard has a liaison in the U.S. interest mission there in Havana. Our understanding, and I'll go back and check this, is that mill-to-mill relations are prohibited until the government of Cuba elects a democratically elected government and does not include either Fidel Castro or President Raul Castro as part of that government. And so that's our understanding of it. From a engagement with militaries, we look to engage with every military organization within the region. We continue to do that with all our partners. And so if legislation, if the opportunity is presented for us to do that, we would welcome that opportunity.
All right, well, double check Helm-Burton if you would, because we don't read it that way. And we welcome your testimony. General Fraser, there's in terms of the situation in Haiti, I believe you mentioned that there's some redeployments now that are going on and will continue, but there's some enablers that Southcom apparently will leave, some capabilities that you're going to leave in Haiti. Can you just describe that briefly?
Mr. Chairman, we're still really in the discussion of that and planning that. It's an evolving situation. The focus right now on the ground is helping make sure shelter, sanitation, and security needs are met, especially for the numbers of displaced people. That is the evolving situation right now. So we're looking to support USAID, the other international efforts with the right types of capability. So I don't have good definition for you right now of what that will be.
All right, let me ask both of you on a subject which we've spent some time on and obviously will be considering, and that's the possible repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Let me just ask you your personal views, essentially. General Renoir, let me start with you. What are your personal views as to whether we should continue that policy or whether we ought to repeal it?
Mr. Chairman, I think my personal view, I think probably is very close to what you heard with General Petraeus' his testimony a short time ago. I believe that we have all served through the course of our tenure with individuals who were gay or lesbian and who were not allowed to talk about that. I think those individuals served honorably. I think the importance of maintaining the standards of discipline is critical to our military, but I believe that we should not hold, if you will, those individuals hostage because of the policy we have. So I think it's appropriate that we conduct the detailed study the Secretary has asked us to conduct, and so that we understand the implications, and then we move forward.
Okay, General Fraser, you have a personal view?
Chairman Levin, my views very much correspond to that of General Renoir, and that is that I think it's really appropriate that we do a very deliberate understanding of what the President's intent is in relation to Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so I support what General Renoir said.
Thank you very much. Senator McCain.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, all of us have served with people who are of that sexual orientation, and they have served honorably. That's not the question. It's the question which I think you have answered, and I guess I'd ask you to repeat, is we have to understand the implications of repeal before we make a decision on repeal. Would that be an accurate reflection of your views?
Senator McCain, it would be.
General Fraser?
Senator McCain, I agree.
So a moratorium would obviously be a de facto repeal of the policy before we have understood the implications for battle effectiveness on the men and women in the military. So I appreciate your views, and I share them. And for the Congress of the United States to take action before we have had a thorough review of the policy, not of the way to repeal the policy, would be would you agree would be the best way to proceed?
Senator McCain, just to be clear, I guess, is my view that we should have a moratorium, and I think we ought not to have a moratorium while we conduct this. I think, as the Secretary and the Chairman and the service chiefs have all indicated, that would cause, I think, some confusion in that process, and so I think better to let the study go and then make a decision.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, there are efforts to impose a moratorium which would be tantamount to repeal, but I'd like to move on. General Renoir, could you describe to me in as short as possible, but as terms that perhaps Americans can understand about how dangerous the situation is on our southern border as vis-a-vis the drug cartels, the existential threat to the government of Mexico, I'm asking you to make it short, but problems of corruption, and the possibility that that violence can spill over onto our side of the border. This is an issue that I don't know why we haven't, Americans, we haven't had the visibility of how great a threat and danger this is to the very existence of the government of Mexico and the effect that it's having on public opinion in Mexico.
Senator McCain, thanks for that question. This is, as you mentioned, really the principal struggle that the government of Mexico is undergoing. President Calderon has courageously put his military in the field to take this on where local law enforcement officials have been corrupted or intimidated. That's not the traditional role of the Mexican military, and it does put some strain on them, but we are working very closely to share the lessons we've learned in places like Afghanistan and others to do that. As you know, the violence in places like Juarez has been substantial. I think we are close to 7,000 murders that occurred in 2009.
That's 7,000 murders.
7,000, and I must say, drug-related murders that generally were cartel on cartel, but as you know, that spills over into the population. The Mexicans,
and murders of individuals who are part of the Mexican drug enforcement and military and others, they've singled them out for assassination, including those that have been trained by the United States. Is that true?
Senator, I'm not sure about the last statement, including those trained. I know we've had some people that we have trained in the past that were involved and corrupted.
No, I meant who were assassinated.
Senator, I believe there are a small number that were U.S. trained in that, Mexicans, but certainly your other statement is absolutely correct. These are individuals who are competing for, if you will, market share in the drug business. And cartels are very aggressively taking each other on to if you will, build the distribution process, the market share. So that continues, and we are working aggressively with our Mexican partners to help build an interagency capacity for Mexico to deal with this. I'm cautious when we talk about the level of threat to the Mexican government, because I think President Calderon is strong. I think he enjoys support, and I think he's aggressively working this and growing an interagency team that can be effective.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but isn't it also true, though, that Mexican public opinion, because of this level of violence, is beginning to turn, frankly, in the wrong direction? Is that, you have
Senator,
indications of that?
We have seen that the public opinion polls have come down on this regard, although I will say in just a recent month, I've seen some numbers where the Mexican people have continued to express their support in Calderon's efforts. So it's a little bit of a balance in that regard. Finally, Senator, just very quickly, with respect to the border area here.
Would you also mention the problem of corruption?
Absolutely. Across, especially in the local police areas, the local governing officials, that element of corruption has become significant. And it is the means by which the cartels, if you will, create their influence on government, essentially to leave them alone, to not interfere with the drug trade business. And there has been a substantial effort placed by the Mexican government to replace corrupt officials in the towns and communities. But as you know, it takes time to build those credible leaders back up, and that's still a work in progress.
Would you, for the record, provide the committee with recommendations of what you think we need to do, more we need to do, including the success or failures of Plan Merida? I'd appreciate that. And I understand we're spending about $400 million a year cooperating with the Mexican government on this issue.
That's correct. Senator McCain, if I could, for the record, give you a much more detailed look both in that area and our cooperation with law enforcement along the border, because I think there's a good news story there.
Thank you very much. General Frazier, could I turn to Cuba a second? As you know, just in the last week or so, a young man named Orlando Zapata died on a hunger strike as a political prisoner in Cuba. After a brief experimentation with a small amount of free enterprise, the Cuban government has cracked down. They have even been more brutal in their repression of human rights, and their prisons have a large number of political dissidents who have simply sought to exercise their rights as human beings. Is that true?
Yes, Senator, that's true.
Isn't there also evidence that from time to time there has been the Cuban government and military facilitating the drug trade?
Senator, I can't confirm that. I'll have to get back to you on it. Take that for the record.
Has there been any cooperation that you know of on the part of the Cuban government in trying to restrain the drug trade?
Senator, we have cooperation, as I mentioned, and I'm not the expert on this because it's really within the U.S. Coast Guard as we look at migration as well as the drug trade there within the straits around Cuba.
Is there any doubt that the that Raul Castro and Fidel have been more repressive in the last year or two than they were in the past?
Senator, I think they have continued to remain fairly strict on the populace, but I can't quantify whether that has been more restrictive over the last couple of years than before, so I need to also get back to you.
Well, then let me commend for your reading various human rights organizations who have written and testified that the Cuban government is even more repressive. I strongly suggest you read that, General. It might be illuminating for you. Finally, how do you assess the threat of the cooperation between Iran and Venezuela and the Venezuelan? As you know, last week Spain's High Court said the Venezuelan government facilitated contacts between the FARC and ETA to plan the assassination of Colombian officials visiting Spain, including President Uribe. Do you have any information on that and other activities on the part of the Venezuelan government?
Senator, I do not have any direct information on that. We have continued to watch very closely for any connections between illicit and terrorist organization activity within the region. We have not seen any connections specifically that I can verify that there has been a direct government to terrorist connection. We are concerned about it. I'm skeptical. I continue to watch for it.
You have seen evidence of a relationship between FARC and the Venezuelan government. I mean, that's been published many times.
Senator, I know that there's evidence of FARC camps.
I mean, they got the hard drives. I mean, it's when they raided the FARC camp on the Venezuelan side of the border.
Sir, the raid where
Excuse me, on the other side of the border.
Yes,
yeah.
sir. So there has been some old evidence, but I don't see that evidence. I can't tell you specifically whether that continues or not.
My time has expired. I thank the witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Senator Lieberman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you for your service and leadership. General Renwart, let me add my personal thank you to you for 4 decades of service to our country. You've done it with real honor and excellence, and just personally, it's been a pleasure to get to know you. I wish you the best in your next chapter. I know your wife, as you said, will be happy with her retirement, but having watched others retire, I would say on her behalf that I hope you at least get a part-time job.
Senator, I'm going to work on that.
Okay. I wish you the best. Let me begin with you, General. I'm, of course, as chair of the Homeland Security Committee, very interested and appreciative of the way in which the Northern Command has organized and consolidated the U.S. military's involvement in homeland defense. You bring unique and critically important skills together with the Homeland Security Department. The Department of Defense has been standing up 3 brigade-size consequence management response forces to respond to chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear attack by terrorists or others on our homeland. And I've been very impressed by that and appreciative of it. I was unsettled a bit when the recent QDR said that it would basically scrap the 2nd and 3rd of those and replace them with 10 smaller homeland response forces to be put in each of the 10 basically FEMA regions around the country under Department of Homeland Security. I mean, the regional forces have some appeal, but I'm troubled by the loss of those 2 brigade-size response management forces because of the tremendous skills and specialties that they would have brought wherever an attack on our country of this serious nature might occur. So I wanted to ask you, as you depart this command, how you feel about that change, and whether you feel these regional forces can do as good a job of homeland defense as the 3 brigade-size response management or management response forces?
Senator, thanks. This is an issue that obviously went through a lot of discussion within the Quadrennial Defense Review. We've worked very hard to create those brigade-sized forces over the last few years, and with both the support of the committee and the Secretary, have crafted 2 of those. The third was to be made operational this year. The concern within the discussions of the Quadrennial Defense Review is that these forces may not be as responsive as a force that is, if you will, deployed and lives out in each of these FEMA regions. And after much discussion, the Secretary's made a decision to adjust this format a bit. I think our role in this has been certainly involved in the discussions, but to take the concept that was developed through the QDR discussions and turn it into an operational construct that is effective and executable. And that work is ongoing today, Senator Lieberman. I think that there is some work to do still to ensure that not only do you have trained and equipped forces in these regional areas, but they are accessible and agile and deployable enough to meet the expectations and the assumptions that were central to the QDR discussions. We still got a little work to do on that. Is it possible that they will be as effective? Yes, sir, I think it is. It really depends on the fact that we will make a commitment to train and fund and make these integratable, if you will, into a capable force when a large-scale event occurs. That's our role in Northern Command. We're working hard on that. We've still got work to do before I can give you a definitive answer.
Okay, well, we're going to keep in touch on that because you phrased it exactly in terms of my concerns, which is whether these 10 regional forces will be able to quickly deploy with the range of skills to the site of an attack where we'll need something as large as a brigade or 2 or 3 to protect the people and stand up the region again. I want to understand, make just clear for the record, will the 1 brigade-size force remain in effect?
Yes, active? Senator, it will. In fact, it will grow by about 700 individuals with those same critical life-saving skill sets.
Right.
So that will remain. It will be focused on an active duty brigade, so it gives you the most rapid access to that, to that force. And in addition, then, we will have 2 smaller forces that will be predominantly the command and control, the logistics, the joint reception, and some immediate life-saving capability in those 2 smaller forces. But they're really designed to receive so-called general purpose forces in a large-scale event.
Okay, let me move on to the ground-based mid-course defense system that has been mentioned in the move to the phased adaptive system that we're going to now. There's some question about the future of the 2-stage ground-based interceptor. I know there's supposed to still be some testing of it going on. I wanted to ask you, as you sort of prepare to retire, whether you believe we should continue to develop and test the 2-stage ground-based interceptor, for instance, as a hedge, excuse me, against a possible Iranian breakout, and whether, particularly in regard to the Homeland Defense, whether NORTHCOM has studied options for deploying a 2-stage ground-based interceptor in the United States to give another layer of defense to our homeland.
Senator, the operational test program does continue to include both the 2- and the 3-stage tests. We are fully supportive of that, as we have had discussions with both the Department and with the Missile Defense Agency. Our support for the phased adaptive approach is strong. We're confident that it has real potential, but we've also asked the Secretary and received, I think, budgetary support to not foreclose the capabilities that might be resident in a 2- or a 3-stage interceptor. So we do support that continued testing, and my information is that continues to stay on track. With respect to the phased adaptive approach, I think that certainly the information so far looks very positive, very capable system, and so we're supportive of that. We think it gives us great added depth to our homeland defense capability. Again, we don't want to foreclose any possibilities in the future, so continuing that testing is important to us.
Good to hear. I agree with that totally. General Fraser, let me ask you a kind of big picture question, because I think we often find that the regional commanders have some of the best views of the regions in which they lead because of the comprehensiveness of their contacts with the region. So as you step back and look at Southern Command, Latin America generally, plus, there seems to be here, as in other parts of the world, an ongoing sort of conflict or competition between the forces of freedom, generally speaking, and the forces of dictatorship, the forces of sort of socialist economies and free economies, for friends of the United States and enemies of the United States. So at this moment, where would you say the momentum is? Who's winning? How are we and in a more direct sense, how are we doing in the area of your responsibility?
Senator, I think overall we are doing well. We continue to have positive relations with most of the nations within the region, especially from a military to military standpoint. We see that very directly. There's only a couple instances where that has really been reduced. Our relations with the military in Venezuela is one of those. Also with the military in Bolivia is another. But overall, those relations remain good. I see a real competition, as you mentioned, within the region for various ideologies, and they're coming from various different directions, and that competition continues today. Really, I see the view of the United States growing. There's a 71% approval rating of the U.S. Image within the general populace within Latin America, and so I see a positive trend from our relations in the region growing.
Thank you for that. That 71% appreciation of the United States in Latin America may be higher than the appreciation of the United States in America today. I hope we can catch up with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me echo the comments everyone's made about your great service and how much I appreciate both of you, your great wives and all that stuff. General Fraser, let me tell you what I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to ask you if we ought to close Gitmo, but I do want to get something in the record here of my personal feelings. I've had a chance to really get into it. I've studied it. There's never been a case of waterboarding. The conditions, the treatment of the people are good down there. It's a secure location. There are approximately 200 terrorists left. The low-hanging fruit is gone. And of that low-hanging fruit, about 20% have been back in the fight, according to reports that I have. Once the terrorists are physically in the United States, there should be no doubt to anyone that these terrorists will gain additional constitutional rights and fall within the jurisdiction of the federal courts. The attacks leading up to 9/11 were not the result of holding detainees in Gitmo. The attacks in 9/11 were not the result of holding detainees, and the repeated attempts to attack this country were not a result of holding detainees. Now, moving detainees held at Gitmo to the United States would not stop future terrorist attacks to this country. Those guys hate us. They want to kill everyone in this room. And, you know, the Americans across the country, they understand this. The polling is showing that 2 to 1 say that it shouldn't be closed. And all these people who are coming up with these great ideas and what we can do to bring the terrorists to the United States for either incarceration or for trial, go to all elaborate detail as to how we can do this, what it's going to cost, how we're going to build the courts. There's a simpler answer. Just leave it open. Now, again, I'm not going to ask you that question. But I would ask you this. You have had opportunity to go there, General Fraser, and just very briefly, in terms of your impression of the operations and of the treatment of detainees, do you have any comment to make?
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Our responsibility in Southern Command is for the safe, legal, transparent, and humane treatment of the detainees at the facility in Guantanamo.
And they are being treated that way?
Yes, sir. They are very much being treated that way. I'm very proud of the men and women from the military who come and provide that.
Okay, you don't need to elaborate. There's a Sergeant Major Carter from Fort Sill who had been stationed there several times. Her comment to me, she's in charge of the prison system we have at Fort Sill, and she said, I don't know what's wrong with those people in Washington. Go back and tell them. That is a jewel that's been run properly, and she's one who has actually been there. And I don't want to belabor that because that's a decision that was made by your commander-in-chief, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position. But following up on something that has been said by Senator Lieberman, General Renoir, you and I talked about this in my office. It is true that I was very strongly in support of the third site in Poland. That's a site that would have given us the capability of knocking something down. At the time, by 2012, with slippage, maybe 2015. Ironically, that's when we think that the Iranians are going to have the capability of sending something over. Now, I know in response to the chairman's question that we have a lot of ground-based stuff out there. It's in California and Alaska. I'm not comfortable when I look at these maps. So I won't ask you how you would stand on going back to that position with Poland and the Czech Republic. But I would say that since we're looking at the SM-32B out there someplace to be determined, we don't have a date on that yet. We do have a date on the SM-32A, but that's for short and medium range of 2018. I still believe that we should reconsider that, and I would only ask you this question. Are you at all concerned that we're going to have what would have to be the SM-32B capability soon enough?
Well, Senator, the intelligence estimates on when the Iranians will field a real capability obviously have moved around a bunch. So we want to make sure that we are providing sufficient capability to defend our own country. I believe with the current Alaska-based and Vandenberg-based systems, we can meet that need. If we see proliferation of capabilities from Iran, we certainly need to consider expanding that capability.
All right, that's good enough. Now, since you're going to be bailing out of this, and we talked about that, I certainly wish you lucky. What, 39 years? Is that how long?
That's correct, Senator.
Goodness. Well, that's great. It's been a great service. I would ask you, just in the remainder of the time that I have, now that you're going out and you can reflect back, you know, and General Frazier knows how strongly I feel about our partnership programs, our train and equip programs. My concern that I had that perhaps some of these programs were not, like the 1207, the civilian to civilian, maybe should have been left where it was. That's my own personal opinion. But in terms of one size fits all, we're talking about the train and equip programs. I met the CCIF programs, the FMF, the FMS, and all of that. What's your thought about, between countries, the tailor-making of these things? Any thoughts you'd like to leave with us on that subject?
Senator,
it's a good program. We all agree with that, I think, but can it be better if we could figure out a way to tailor it better?
Yes, sir. This is key and essential to all of our operations around the world. I've spent 13 years in NATO. I've spent 5.5 years in Southwest Asia as part of the CENTCOM AOR, and of course in the Pacific as well. And in every case, those combatant commanders would tell you that the 1206, 1207, 1208, FMF, FMS, all of those building partnership capacity programs are critical to allow us to do just what Doug Frazier said, where Ken Keane and the Brazilian counterpart know each other because they've worked together, they've been to school together, we've created training relationships together. We have to absolutely keep those programs intact and support them and work through the department-to-department challenges between primarily state and defense on making them easier to take advantage of. They are critical to a combatant commander's success.
You know, I've spent a disordinate amount of time in some of the African nations, and I've left, not just there, but in the Balkans and every place else, with the idea that we made a mistake at one time on our IMET program. We were kind of treating it as if we were doing them a favor. by allowing them to come here, to our country, to train and train with our people. And I became pretty convinced after a period of time that we should have lifted, which we did, the article requirement that we had before allowing them to come in, that was really to our benefit more than it is to their benefit, that once these people come in, they train, whether it's no matter what facility it is, but train with our people, get that quality training, and allegiance is formed that never leaves. Do you think that's right?
Senator, very shortly, absolutely. My youngest son spent 27 months in Senegal in the Peace Corps, and he will tell you firsthand that the relationships of American outreach to these countries are incredible.
Yeah. Well, my time's expired, but General Fraser, do you generally agree with our conversation here and our opinions?
Yes, Senator, I completely agree.
Wait a minute.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your dedication to not only the American military, but to the nation. So thank you very much. General Renoir, a disturbing phenomena seems to be the increasing sophistication and armaments of the Mexican drug cartels, assault weapons, anti-tank weapons, sophisticated night vision devices, sophisticated communication devices. Where are all these coming from?
Senator, thanks. On the very first meeting I had in Mexico, their senior military leadership outlined their concern over what they called U.S. trafficking of weapons into Mexico. Clearly, there is no doubt that there are weapons moving north to south into Mexico, and we've partnered very closely with our law enforcement friends to help provide information from the Mexican military as they've collected the forensics of these so that we can, in fact, prosecute. And there have been over 40 prosecutions over the last 2 years of, I'll call them weapons dealers. But certainly we see an involvement from here in this country with respect to illicit weapons trade. We're also seeing that move from other nations around the world as well. So I think this is a hemispheric problem. Both General Fraser and I have talked about this, and something we need to continue to work.
But do you think we're taking effective steps? And again, what seems to be very ironic is that in some of these recorded incidents, the drug cartels outgun the military and the police, and that's unfortunate.
Yes, sir. In fact, we see 50 caliber weapons. We see rocket-propelled grenades. We see a variety of those things being used, and that is increasingly of concern to the Mexican military. And it has resulted, by the way, in them being much more forthcoming with serial numbers and that sort of thing, so it allows our law enforcement to really take some action.
But we have to do, I would assume, I'll ask you, do we have to do much more on our side of the border to control?
Yes, sir, I believe we do. And I think our law enforcement partners are very eager to do that. It's continuing that information sharing between the two nations that will assist.
On the other side, you know, we're supplying both sides essentially in this battle. And under the Department of State's Merida initiative, we provided helicopters and light attack aircraft, inflatable boats, et cetera. Can you tell us, is that being used effectively?
Senator, I can, and it is. The Mexicans were very appreciative that we accelerated that process to help meet the Merida objectives. We delivered the first 5 of the Bell helicopters this past December. We'll deliver 2 or 3 more this year. Patrol aircraft, computer systems that will allow them to fuse information, to do border security, to communicate better, all have been put in place, night vision goggles. And the Mexicans are also reaching out to us for the training associated with integrating these to be effective. And we've made great progress in that regard. We need to continue that effort. Merida shouldn't just be a 1 or 2 year event, but it's a relationship over time.
Is there danger of some of the border states of Mexico becoming ungoverned spaces that would invite not just narco gangs, but more sophisticated international terrorists to set up shop?
Senator, I think there's, I would not characterize ungoverned spaces because I think there is a...
I don't want to suggest that the government of Mexico is incompetent, capable down to every level, but it's just the turmoil there, I guess.
There is significant turmoil, and certainly local governance is corrupted in some places, but that's very much on the focus of President Calderon and his senior, both Attorney General as well as his senior military leaders, and that's allowed him to push, or it's enabled him to push forces out to try to help reduce that. And we have a very good relationship with the Mexican border state commanders as well.
Thank you. General Fraser, your comments on sort of the flow of weapons and other items, not from the United States, but from other areas in the hemisphere.
Senator, thank you. We find that there is a flow. A lot of the flow is headed towards Colombia right now, but it also is into Central America. A lot of the weapons that are flowing, originating in Central America from weapons that were sold there in the 80s. But we also see a flow that's coming out of the United States in that direction also.
Thank you. Just let me switch back to General Nwatu. The CBRNE, chemical, biological, radiological, high-yield explosive teams that you've put together, and the Consequence Management Response Force. Can you give us an update of their deployment and their effectiveness? There's two, I believe.
There are, sir. Just very quickly, we actually exercised one of those forces this year from a standing start. We mobilized them, deployed them, and put them into action in a very realistic scenario in Indiana earlier at the end of last year. Comments from the Urban Search and Rescue Association, the professionals in this business, were that it was as good as any they've seen, the Fairfax unit, for example, that we've talked about, any of they've seen in the world. So I'm very happy with the quality and capability of these forces. As I mentioned to Senator Lieberman, as we continue to grow this concept that has come from the QDR, we want to maintain that standard of capability for the people of this country, and we'll work hard at that.
Let me ask you a general question, General Renoir. That is the status of the equipment for National Guard, since they're a major partner in your efforts in NORTHCOM. Can you give just a general view of...
Yeah, very quickly, and what I'll do is, if I may, provide some more data for the record, but the National Guard, on the average across the country now, is up from, as you know, 40 or 50% equipage now to 70 plus. That's new equipment. The training quality is up, and we're especially pleased that the equipment related to these homeland support missions is close to 100% in most of the states.
Thank you. General Fraser, you have many roles, both air, sea, and land, but can you comment briefly about the Southern Command's NAV South, the Naval Forces, and counter-narcotics operations?
Senator, the DoD mission within counter-narcotics is to support the detection and monitoring of the transit of illicit goods, if you will, primarily through the maritime environments, the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. So working through Joint Interagency Task Force South and Interagency Group, we support the detection and monitoring in those areas. The U.S. Navy ships do that, as well as U.S. Coast Guard ships, as well as aircraft. And then once those are detected, then hand them off for intercept and detention to law enforcement organizations.
Just a quick follow-up. We all read recently about the growing use of submersible vehicles and submarines to move drugs around. Is that a continuing upward trend?
Actually, Senator, it's decreased. We saw 68 movements primarily in the Eastern Pacific in 2008. Last year we saw 46. And so we've seen a decline. Now that's just a one-year sample size, but that's the most recent data, and that's the first decline we've seen.
Thank you, sir. General, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Lemieux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your opening comments that discussed the connections between Iran and Venezuela, and I know Senator McCain spoke about that too. General Fraser, you and I have had an opportunity to speak a lot about that. So that's a topic that I want to explore today. I'll start off by saying thank you both for your service. General Renoir, thank you, 39 years, that's incredible, and thank you to both of your spouses. We put our spouses through a lot, so I'm appreciative of them as well. In speaking about the growing projection of influence of Iran in the region. I recently had an opportunity to visit Colombia and to visit with our military folks there who are assisting with the military leaders in Colombia in the fight against the FARC. And there is this concern, Senator McCain spoke about the recent revelations of the judge in Spain about the assassination attempt on President Uribe. We know that the flights, the drug trafficking flights, are flying over Venezuela to get to Central America to bring those drugs into the United States. Do you consider Venezuela to be the biggest destabilizing factor in the region in terms of our national security interests?
Senator, I don't know if I would take it as far as the biggest destabilizing factor. They are continuing on a pursuit of reducing U.S. influence in the region. And they are working with various countries and entities to try and enable that.
Let me try it this way. Is there a country in Latin America that is working against our interests as much as Venezuela?
Senator, I would argue that, that as we look at Cuba, they're also in that same vein.
We've seen some recent articles even calling it Venecuba. That there are Cuban military officials working within the Venezuelan government. And the concern I have, and I think this touches on both of your focuses, with you, General Anwar, having the focus on Mexico as well, is that we have this whole Central American region that runs, we have Colombia obviously on the tip of South America, and then it runs up through the region into Mexico. And we have these drug trafficking chains, and where we, some have described it to me as we squeeze the balloon in one place, they find another way to go. If we shut down the semi-submersibles or we work against that, they take more air flights. If we stop them at sea, which you just had a recent success, General, then they come over land. And I know our ambassador in Panama is concerned about the increased traffic through the isthmus there. So what's your focus, and I assume that there's coordination between the two of you. What's the focus and what's the plan going forward to combat this narco-drug trafficking? And do you have any concerns that with the projection of influence of Iran in the region, the idea that we know that Hezbollah and Hamas are, have set up shop in the region, that there could be a combination between those groups and the narco-traffickers?
Senator, if I could start with that. From a destabilizing standpoint, the biggest concern I have in the region is illicit trafficking. I think it's growing as a regional issue throughout and spreading to other parts of the region. Brazil is now the second largest cocaine user in the world. And so it is the criminal elements of that, it is the illicit trafficking that really is my biggest concern. What we are looking to do is our national intelligence community is taking an opportunity to look at illicit trafficking as a regional enterprise, not just what's affecting in an individual country, so that we have the opportunity to understand that enterprise as an enterprise, to try and push on all sides of the balloon, if you will, rather than just on one part of that balloon, to see if we can start squeezing that balloon effect down. So that's really the efforts that we're ongoing. That's in direct correlation and coordination with the U.S. Northern Command, Joint Interagency Task Force South, Joint Task Force North. Everybody is working this in addition with law enforcement to try and get a better understanding.
General Anwar.
Senator, I first agree that with General Fraser's comment that this is an enterprise. We've got to approach it as an enterprise, and I'd add that starts in our own cities. 230 cities in our country have seen increases in drug-related gang violence. We need to work that internally. But in addition, coordination from the supply through the demand is critical if you're going to really make a difference. Our two commands work very closely and have partnered with Mexico from the south and the north, for example, to try to arrest some of that flow. And the Mexicans have been increasingly eager for that coordinated support from both of us. So I think there's a real opportunity, and we're both committed to continue working that. More importantly, we have support from our friends in Customs and Border and DEA and the other federal agencies.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your good work on that. I know in traveling to Colombia that now the Colombian military is going to be training some folks from Mexico on helicopter operations. So I think that's a good step. I want to just, and General Fraser, you and I have discussed this, in private, is that I want you to stay focused, if you will, on Iran's, projection of influence in the region, because I'm worried that those trafficking chains could be used for other purposes. And we had an emerging threats subcommittee meeting yesterday, chaired by my colleague, Senator Nelson, and to a person, everyone acknowledged that Iran is, the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. And when I see Ahmadinejad, traveling the world, including spending several, stops in Latin America, whether it's Venezuela or even, some of our friendly nations down there, I'm concerned about it. So I want you to, if you would, please keep a focus on that.
Senator, we are focused on that.
Right. Let me ask you a question, General Fraser, about Colombia specifically. We've been trying to pass this Colombia free trade agreement. And I think it's an agreement that has implications beyond trade. I think it has implications to our alliances and our friendship with Colombia. Do you see that in terms of our national security interest as being a positive step forward if we could get that agreement ratified?
Senator, I think it would be a very positive step forward. One of the things that supports security within the region is the opportunity to have stable economies and vibrant economies. Colombia has that. I think a free trade agreement would enhance that capability and give an alternative to the illicit traffickers.
And I would assume you would agree that a free trade agreement with Panama would also be productive.
Yes, Senator, I would.
Right. General Lenoir, just to switch gears a little, you, in your opening statement that I reviewed, you refer to Russian Bear Tu-95 flights probing American and Canadian airspace. Can you comment on the activities of those Russian airplanes? I know they were probing our airspace, maybe not specifically in it. You sent up some fighters, I guess, in response. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Senator, just very quickly, we've seen an increase in the last few years of Russian, so their words, long-range training flights approaching our sovereign airspace. In our NORAD role, we have been conducting this surveillance and response mission for over 52 years. We have trained, well-equipped capabilities to monitor our airspace, and really we attempt to identify any aircraft that is not on a flight plan, unidentified, not talking to people on the radio, so that we understand their intentions. We continue to do that. We've had a couple instances this year where the Russians have flown close to our airspace in the Aleutian chain. Nothing is threatening us. Their aviators act professionally, but again, we want to make sure that we don't allow any aircraft from any source to enter our airspace without being identified.
Do you have an assessment of their intentions?
I think they have, the Russians have neglected their, if you will, their bomber force for many years. I think because of financial concerns, they are, the influx of energy money has allowed them to refocus some of that, and we're seeing more of the training that they used to conduct, not at the levels of the Cold War days, but certainly enough to keep pilots proficient, and that, I think, it characterizes the bulk of what they're doing.
Okay. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lemieux. Let me just quickly mention, since we've talked about Chile, that there's a report that right in the middle, apparently, of President Piñera's inauguration ceremonies, there was a magnitude 7.2 quake reported in Chile. So it's not as bad as the earlier one, obviously, but it's still a significant sized earthquake. Senator Begich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I thought I wouldn't have time, and I snuck around. I broke some rule, I'm sure. And Doug, I gave your wife a hug. I hope behind your back. I want you to know that. In all full disclosure, but it's good to see you again in Rena. General Lenoir, I have a couple questions first, and then I'm going to have a couple for General Fraser. But first, as you know, with the Arctic and some of the work that's now going on, especially on two fronts. One is the climate change that's occurring in the Arctic ice melting, and that you have three commands really that kind of manage the Arctic. Is there discussion, or is there an opinion you have in regards to this that my personal view, and I leave it to the military to figure this out, that we probably have to unify this at some point like we did, I think it was with AFRICOM, was a similar situation, 2 or 3 commands. Is there discussions now about trying to figure this out as we move more and more into understanding what opportunities but also really challenges? And I think Senator Lemieux just mentioned one of those, but that's in the Aleutian. Some would think that's close to Alaska. It is, but it's hundreds of miles from the north. But are you now, as an organization, starting to think about this, or can you give me some thoughts on that?
Senator Begich, you bet. I was the former Vice Commander of Pacific Air Forces. In fact, and as you know, Doug Frazier was the commander of 11th Air Force, and he wore 4 hats.
I know.
And I always felt that it was important for U.S. Northern Command and NORAD to try to help reduce the number of hats that we asked him to wear. We continue that effort. We will have some discussions this year with the chairman and service chiefs in the Unified Command Plan discussion to help streamline that process. Certainly there is concern that we provide for an active defense capability for Alaska. As you know, during World War II, the Aleutian chain were invaded and held by the Japanese. That's something we don't want to repeat. The mission of that homeland defense falls in U.S. Northern Command. So we want to partner with Pacific Command and with the chairman and the Joint Chiefs to try to better streamline that process. So maybe we can take 1 hat or 2 hats off and get down to just a manageable amount.
Do you agree, as the Arctic continues its process, as we know, probably in 30 years is the estimate that all summer will be ice-free, that there's going to be a lot of other activity, civilian and military, by other countries within that region, and thinking now about it is probably to our advantage rather than thinking 10 years or 15 years down the line. Is that a fair statement?
Senator, absolutely. The Arctic, none of us are expert enough to know how much open water for how long, but certainly we're going to see more navigable water in the Arctic. It's an area where we had not focused our attention, national attention, for quite a period of time. Before the last administration left, they published a paper indicating strategy for the Arctic. I think that's a great start. We need to continue that effort, and I think partner with the Arctic Council nations on a common strategy for research and for development to settle disputes. And then finally, and I know the Senate will continue to consider this, the UN
Law of the
Sea Treaty is something that is critical to give us a seat at the table to be involved in these discussions, and we very much support ratification of that treaty as soon as we can.
You got my next question, which was Law of the Sea, and I guess one question that comes up, and tell me if you can, very short answer, some are concerned that by the United States being part of that, the Law of the Sea, that we will give up some of our sovereignty. Do you believe that statement?
No, sir, I don't. I think United States sovereignty is something we hold and protect very dearly, and I don't believe we would give that up.
Very good. Let me ask you, if I can, on the missile defense system in Alaska. As you know, great debate last year. Should it be 40 plus or should it be 30? And the decision was through mutual discussions, and I think this committee did a lot of work to get to the agreement of 30. And do you still agree with that statement that it should be 30 operational GBIs there?
Yes, Senator, I think 30 is the right number. I would point out that the additional missiles that will be constructed are not restricted from being used if we were to need them.
Correct.
And I think that gives us some capacity to plus if that would be required.
Right, and I wanted to comment on that. I want to thank you for that, because I think one of the things you have done, especially in the last 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months, is create that flexibility that, depending on the situation, you could plus up and have a situation available or infrastructure available to handle that as part of the plan. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, yes, sir.
In that regard, one of the things that I want to make sure, I know in the 2010 budget, there's probably, I want to say this might be close number, $13, $14 million to continue to deal with Field 2 up there to get it completed. We know through our work and through your agencies or agencies of the Defense Department that it needs closer to about $100 million to finish out all the work that's necessary to keep that flexibility as they close down Field 1, which you know was a kind of a test site of 6. How do you think you'll be able to go about making sure those revenues, those resources are there to continue to make sure the base infrastructure is available to take care of the Field 1, which is in deplorable condition? Give me your, those are my words. I know those aren't the technical words. But.
If I could, let me provide you some more detail for the record. But we work very closely with General Riley I believe his view is that he's got sufficient flexibility to be able to ensure that we can keep Field 2 on track. And but let us get back to you with some more specifics on that.
That'd be great. And I just want to echo that. Please, whatever he can do to keep that moving along, because the mobilization of the equipment and the people are working, and when you demob, it just is more costly, and this is a huge opportunity. So I know he has a lot of flexibility, because the way we wrote that last year was to give him the flexibility as he saw fit. So if you could get us that, that'd be great, and I'd encourage him to move forward.
Yes, sir, we'll do.
Last question then, Doug, I don't want to leave you out, General Fraser, but one, as more and more alternative renewable energy is being debated in Alaska, one of the big issues is wind turbines. General Renoir, this is the last question for you. How are you dealing with that and understanding, and I know it's a very small, but I know we're starting to hear some concerns that it may interfere with the mission and airspace, and are you working with the civilian population to make sure we manage this correctly, and are there things we need to be looking out for as we deal, for example, with an energy bill and making sure that the military is not forgotten in this equation?
Senator, that's a great question. Very quickly, there is a challenge as we develop particularly wind farms, but we also see with new building construction where that development interferes with the send-receive capability of our ground-based radars. I sent a letter to Secretary Gates asking for a formal body to be formed, allowing us to review these so that a developer has a place to come to ask these questions.
Oh, great.
Secretary's committed Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, Paul Stockton, to lead that effort for the department. We're partnering with the FAA and others, but we need to continue to make this process mature. We've had questions from Senator Webb and others on similar issues, and we know that's a real concern, and we're committed to work that aggressively.
Great. Please keep us informed on that. That's great to hear that. Last, really for General Fraser, I feel like I have to ask you a question because I don't want to leave you there, and you are a great addition to our Alaska team up there, and I know you're doing a great job in Southern Command, and we've had some great discussion in regards to that. One of the things I want to just ask you, and I've had a conversation about a special unit within your organization that deals with kind of the humanitarian component and the work you do. Do you, and we talked briefly about how it's appropriate for your command. It may not be as appropriate for other commands, but have you found that component, that unit, of high value for your command in assisting you with some of the unique situations you have in Central America and kind of the Southern Command section? And maybe you could just expand a little bit on it. I found it very intriguing that you had this underneath your belt.
You're talking human rights? Or?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We have a human rights office that has been in existence for quite a number of years now. Has a human rights initiative in which 34 countries from around the region have all signed up to. A very active program, has made and helped enable a lot of significant progress throughout the region. Colombia has come up fairly dramatically in their efforts and their focus on this. Guatemala has the same. They're very much connected within this. So it's a very vibrant office and is out actively pursuing and enabling and enriching human rights discussions throughout the region.
And it's unique to Southern Command, is that correct?
Southern Command is the only combatant command that has one of these, and it's a resource that's available to any of the combatant commanders.
Very good. I again want to thank you for our conversation, especially during the earthquake and the work you have done there and your troops have done and all the affiliated services that kind of came to the call immediately. As I had heard great descriptions of your capacity to stay up many long nights and sleep on whatever's available in order to continue to keep the command working. And I just want to thank you and the troops for doing such a good job under a very unique situation and how fast you mobilized.
Senator, it's a great team effort. Thank you.
Very good. Good to see you both. In general, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Let me just announce that when we begin the second hearing, we will follow the same order of recognition that we've been following for the first hearing. We're not going to start a new or changed order in terms of recognition of senators so that everybody can know where they stand. Senator Collins.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, let me thank you for your 39 years of extraordinary service. I assume that now that you're retiring, you will be able to get to Maine's Franco-American festivals that we've talked about before to celebrate your heritage. And I look forward to being your personal guide in any of those festivals. I want to bring up an issue that is an increasing problem in my state, and that is the problem of drug trafficking across the northern border. There's been a great deal of focus and indeed discussion this morning about the problem with the Mexican drug cartels. And fortunately, the violence level at the northern border isn't anything close to what we're seeing at the southern border. But that doesn't mean that drug trafficking is not a problem. Indeed, it's such a problem that last December, Maine's federal judges met with me to express their alarm about the enormous increase in drug trafficking, particularly of methamphetamine, across the Canadian border. They told me that Canada is now one of the world's top producers of meth, and that this dangerous drug is increasingly being smuggled across the border in Maine. I understand that the violence associated with the Mexican drug cartels demands that the majority of the resources be focused on that. But I'm concerned about whether there is a sufficient focus on the smuggling of meth and other dangerous drugs into the state of Maine. Could you give me more information on what you're doing to counter what you call in your testimony a serious transnational threat to our country?
Senator, first, I look forward to having you host me at a great event in Maine in the coming days. That would be wonderful. I think you hit on a very important element. We do tend to focus on drug trafficking south to north. And if, as I talk to my Canadian counterparts, both in the military and in the RCMP, they also indicate an alarming increase in drug activity, drug-related violence in Canada. We have, as you know, we have our Joint Task Force North, who is focused on DoD support along borders, both north and south, as well as in the maritime. This year, we actually are increasing the number of small but effective operations that we will conduct along the northern border in partnership with both our federal law enforcement, DEA and others, and our Royal Canadian Mounted Police friends. Let me get that data with more specifics, and I'll take that question, if I may, for the record, and get that back to you specifically as it looks to Maine.
Thank you. I also noted that in your testimony, you indicated that you had taken steps to identify threats similar to the threat posed by Major Hassan at Fort Hood. Have you specifically directed your personnel to do more training on the signs of violent radicalization, particularly Islamist radicalization within the ranks?
Senator, as you know, Secretary Gates directed a fairly detailed study of the Hassan case, and out of that, there are a number of recommendations. They're primarily pushed to the services because they have the responsibility for organized, train, and equip. Our role is to ensure that, if you will, facilities are then provided the right kinds of information so that their local officials can focus their attention on specific events. To that degree, we have worked very closely with our friends in the Federal Bureau of Investigation on information sharing of a nature that would be important to our military facilities. And we've increased that kind of activity over the last really couple of years, and certainly accelerated some of the programs after the Hassan case. So our role is to look at how these services all view these. We're comfortable that the recommendations out of the Secretary's investigation committee make a lot of sense, and we're continuing to support those.
General Frazier, do you have anything to add on that issue?
No, ma'am. We're very much in the same position as General Renuart. So it's really focused. And the only other piece I would put in, those people who are assigned to our organizations, especially the headquarters, then we do have a specific focus on supporting their needs.
Thank you. And finally, I want to associate myself with the comments that Senator Lieberman made about the change and the new teams that are going to take the place of 2 of the 3 CBR&E consequence management response forces. I'm very concerned about whether adequate resources are going to be invested so that we can respond effectively to a weapon of mass destruction. And my specific question is how the new HRFs would coordinate, plan, train, and exercise with the regional FEMA offices. I worked very hard to create a regional FEMA response team that would be across agency lines in response to the failed response to Hurricane Katrina. So that kind of coordination is very important if we're going in a different direction.
Senator, again, just very quickly, we have been asked to create the concept of operations that ensures just that kind of coordination is done. I think there will be a resourcing element of that we have to focus on very clearly, because these Homeland Response Forces are hosted by, under the command of a governor. And so on a day-to-day basis, we have to ensure that across the enterprise of consequence management, all of those are talking. And by the way, they are also connected to the federal agencies like FEMA. So this is a bit of work in progress. We owe the Secretary back a concept brief at the end of this month, and I think we'll have identified some of those very issues that you mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Collins. Senator Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Generals. General Renuart, thank you for taking the time to visit with me yesterday. As I've thought more about your plans to retire in Colorado, I was struck by the old adage that, at least for us elected officials, a statesman is a dead politician. And some wag said we need more statesmen, but I'll leave that for another conversation. I don't know what your long-term plans are, and I don't know what the equivalent in the military is, but we're looking forward to the benefit of your advice and your senior retired status. Although you don't look senior to me, you're fit, and I know we welcome you as a permanent resident in Colorado.
Thanks, Senator.
And I'm going to lean on you for further insights and advice. Would you talk about the National Guard Commission recommendations and specifically how you've increased guardsmen at the headquarters and how they've been incorporated? I think you and I have talked about what a great opportunity this is to further enhance the role of the Guard, to better understand how we utilize and deploy the Guard. I want to tip my hat to you in the Northern for what you've done in that regard. But please elaborate.
Senator, we have 50 full-time National Guard positions in our headquarters. 45 of those are filled. We've grown that number over time. That's very effective. But across my headquarters, a substantial percentage of the active military have served in a position where they've been associated with either the reserves or the Guard, and a substantial percentage of my civilians are former members of the National Guard or the Reserve. So we've got a very good flavor and footprint in that regard. In fact, the state of Colorado has been particularly supportive, as we have 25 Colorado Guardsmen who are part of that full-time support. I just hired a new military assistant for NORAD, and he will come from the Colorado Air National Guard. So we've built a close relationship, and I'm very pleased with that. I think we need to continue to look for opportunities to bring our reserve component in as active participants in our headquarters. We have over 130 positions that could be filled, and we're working closely with both the reserves of our services as well as the National Guard Bureau to try to keep those all as full as possible. So we're very proud of our relationship. I think we've built a closer relationship with the National Guard Bureau itself than we've ever had before.
Kudos to you. And I think you and I share philosophy. I think General Fraser does as well, that the reserves and the Guard in this era of an all-volunteer force, and as powerful and as sophisticated as it is, there's a tendency for it to become isolated from society, and the reserves and the Guard provide that, that pipeline, if you will, and that connection between civilians and those who service so ably in the military. Let me turn to educational opportunities. General Fraser, I want to ask you to comment as well, and I know General Renuart's really been interested in this, particularly in the area of homeland security. And do you think the Joint Command educational opportunities should be expanded, maybe to include PhD programs? And in your experience, are those advanced degrees truly effective at bringing back a level of expertise to the force? If so, could they be enhanced? Maybe General Renuart, start with you, and then General Fraser,
Senator, I think in our traditional paradigm, the services, each of them direct the education programs for their individual people. As we've seen the growth of joint commands, I think that there is an opportunity for joint combatant commands to focus educational opportunities on skill sets that are unique to them. In our case, with Homeland Defense, Homeland Security, civil support, many of those skills don't traditionally reside in our service-focused education programs. And so I think there is an opportunity for us to relook this paradigm and look for opportunities to allow combatant commanders to target a small number, potentially, but a number of unique education programs that will then benefit their commands. And then I think we have to work the personnel system to allow us to take advantage of that. We do that currently with Chairman Mullen's initiative on the AFPAC hands, where we're developing, if you will, area experts in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
General Fraser, you care to comment?
Yes, Senator, thank you. I agree with General Renuart, and I would probably add on another part to that, especially as we've just working through our experience in Haiti, and that is to also include an interagency part to that, because it's not only the joint piece, but it is understanding the other parts of our interagency, our counterparts there, that will have great benefit as we apply a whole-of-government approach in many of the situations that we face in the future.
Yeah, that's helpful. And General Renuart and I talked yesterday about DHS and the Mexican border situation and what's unfolding there. Final question, General Renuart, and I think, in a sense, this strikes right at your legacy. Talk just a little bit about the relationship between the two commands that you oversee, NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM, and why is it important to have a common commander and staff in the future?
Well, I think when the two commands were formed, there was clearly an opportunity there to create a transparent or a transition from warning of threats that NORAD has traditionally provided to the real operational defense of the homeland, whether it's missile or a maritime homeland defense, into consequence management of natural disaster or man-made event. Over the years, the relationships between those two commands have become truly interdependent. Today, you can't separate the functions of warning from the functions of defense actions from the functions of consequence management. The structure that it takes to operate in that spectrum is consistently tied at every level. And while there is certainly a difference between the binational command, NORAD, and the operations there, and the U.S. national authorities for NORTHCOM, the opportunity to keep them connected almost at every level provides great synergy for the nation. In terms of the commander, I believe that it would be difficult not to have the same person in command of both of those headquarters because of that synergy. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen in the last 3 years a real move to operationalize that, and I think the results speak for themselves. We are increasingly effective in that regard. I'm very proud of that.
Well, thank you for that insights. Again, thank you for your service. Thank you to both of you for taking care of our hemisphere, the American hemisphere, and all the opportunities we have here and maintaining our leadership role. And finally, a shout out to the Canadians who've been such great partners of ours, and we're so fortunate to have them on our northern border and to share a common culture and values and outlook. And General, you've maintained, enhanced, and nurtured that relationship. I know I've talked to some of the Canadian general officers, and they're sorry to see you go because you've had such a great relationship with them.
Well, it's in my family blood, so I have to. Thanks.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Udall. Senator Chambliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to both of you for your great leadership, your service to our country. And General Renward, as you wind down these 37 years, I know it's been a long time since your commissioning in 1972, but what great leadership, what great selfless service you have provided to our country, and you're certainly a model to that next generation of leaders in every branch of our service. So thanks for your commitment, thanks for your service, and personally, thanks for your friendship over the years. You've been a great asset to me as we've traversed through any number of issues. So we appreciate you very much. We're not going to let you retire yet, General Frazier. We're going to keep you around a while. So, General Frazier, in highlighting the importance of partnering and partnership with nations in SOUTHCOM area of operations, currently one of the best ways that we have to build and sustain those partnerships is through the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. I was pleased to see both of you comment on that in your opening statements as well as your written statement. Senator Levin and I are pleased to serve on the board for WINSEC, and I've seen firsthand the value of the training that WINSEC conducts and the partnerships with our southern allies that it helps to create. What are your thoughts regarding WINSEC? How does it help you carry out your mission, and what does it provide to nations that choose to send personnel to WINSEC?
Senator, thank you for that question. It's a very important institution for us. It provides a lot of capability building. It has a real focus on democratic values, on human rights instruction. In fact, 10% of the course load is specifically focused on human rights. But as you mentioned, it's really that partnership building, and it's not only partnership building with members of the United States military, but it's across all the militaries who attend those courses. So much like we've experienced in Haiti, where I've had at least a couple of instances where U.S. officers had gone to school and with one case a Canadian counterpart and another case a Brazilian counterpart, and they understood one another right away, and it really facilitated the operations into the future. So no matter where we go in a partnership building capacity throughout the region, or specifically in working in working together on crises, it makes a huge difference for us.
The current Defense Authorization Bill contains a provision requiring public disclosure of names and of students and instructors who attend WINSEC, as well as their countries of origin. In your opinion, what effect will this provision have on foreign countries' willingness to send students as well as instructors to WINSEC, and what effect will it have on WINSEC's ability to help SOUTHCOM carry out its mission?
Senator, I'm concerned that it will have a negative impact on it, that we have gone out and at least looked and discussed with some of our partners there. They would be concerned if those names were released. I'm concerned even for the U.S. military personnel and their families who support WINSEC with the release of that. So I personally do not support the release of names.
Thank you, General Renwart. As you conclude your third year as the commander of NORAD and NORTHCOM, as we look forward, what do you think are the biggest challenges out there for these respective commands?
Senator, I think as we see in many of the services, recapitalization of our infrastructure is important to us. The age of our air sovereignty fighter force obviously is growing, and we want to continue to monitor very closely the development, the fielding of new systems that can allow us to maintain the air sovereignty of our two nations. The radar sites also are aging, and we have initiatives in place, and so continuing to support the modernization of those are the things that I think are very important for the NORAD role. For NORTHCOM, I think continuing to work more closely with our border security partners, our interagency partners, continue to work closely with Mexico, especially in this area of countering illicit trade and traffic, I think are some of the future challenges. And as Senator Collins and Senator Lieberman mentioned, making sure that this National Consequence Management Force is well-organized, trained, and equipped and executable for the nation, because we don't know when one of those events will occur. We have to be ready at any moment.
As you know, in November of 2007, over 450 F-15s were grounded due to structural concerns, a number of them under your command. As a result of that, in NORTHCOM, we had to call on the Canadians who flew CF-18s to fill in for F-15s for a period of about 3 weeks. As our F-15 platforms continue to age, and they're part of that aging fleet that you alluded to, and they make their way towards retirement, are you concerned about available assets and the level of acceptable risk in the conduct of your air sovereignty mission?
Senator, I'm very concerned that we maintain an acceptable force level so that we can keep that mission intact. As you know, the Air Force is conducting if you will, a fighter force review that will target not only the assignment of its aircraft in places, but where we invest money from the Air Force's perspective in maintaining that fighter force as new systems come aboard, and I think you're going to have a hearing about one of those in just a few minutes. I do monitor that very carefully. I've said often publicly on the record that the baseline force that we have has to be maintained, and I'm very comfortable so far that the Department, and certainly the Department of the Air Force, are committed to maintaining that. But it's something we monitor as you see adjustments in delivery rates or in aging rates of each of our systems.
Well, you're right. We're going to be talking about the F-35 here a little later on this morning, and you and I have had an opportunity to visit relative to the performance of the F-22. I'd like for you to comment on that as you have seen it firsthand. And secondly, what effect or impact will a slippage in the IOC on the F-35 have on NORTHCOM?
Senator, first on the F-22, it has proven itself to be an excellent weapon system. We've used it in our air defense missions in Alaska and have found it to be a very capable system, and I think the Department is committed to continue its spiral development into the modern versions of the airplane that were planned. So I'm very comfortable that it gives us a capability that's much needed in our Air Force. With respect to the F-35 timing, again, if we see that program delay, then it will be of interest to me to ensure that we maintain the quality and capability of our existing F-16, F-15 fleet, again, to maintain that air defense. For right now, I don't feel there's an unacceptable level of risk because I think the two match pretty well. But obviously, if something changes, we'll have to monitor that very carefully.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Chambliss. We're ready to proceed, I believe, now to our second hearing. Senator Collins, you don't have an additional question. We thank you both. We are, again, very appreciative of the service that you have always provided this nation, your families, great support. We thank them for that. And again, General Renuart, all the best to you on your upcoming retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to take a 3-minute recess.
3 minutes.